Hola, mi gente. It's April Fool's Day. Can you believe it? April 1st, 2025. I don't have any jokes. I don't have any jokes. I'm way, way, way too serious, mi gente. I take this podcast seriously. I'm kidding. I'm just starting some. Yeah, I will take my subject today very, very seriously. In this week's episode, mi gente, I will focus on one of the things that I love to do and that I believe that I know how to do, storytelling. I would tell you, mi gente, how to tell a modern African story. How to tell a modern African story. The goal here is not to have answers, but to talk about how difficult it has been for me to tell my own story, to understand that it was an African story, and to realize how um, tough it is for people to understand you. Because once um, there is this africanness element to storytelling, it becomes very, 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 very challenging for people to relate, no matter where they are. My experience, Miente, is unique. I am very well aware of it. And I think that awareness here is key. And I didn't always have that awareness. I didn't always realize that the fact that my background was very, very different made it very, very easy to misunderstand me, to stigmatize me, and to marginalize me, and to basically otherize me. I had to become aware that my story was a modern African story, and there was no way for me to escape it, no matter how hard I tried. So yes, modern African stories. I left Cameroon in 1993. I was 14 years old. So I haven't lived in Cameroon for over 30 years. So you have an idea how old I am. I've left Africa a long, long time ago, and I think my background um, is mostly American. I did my studies in America. I worked in America. And for most of my life, given where I went to school, prep schools, college in America, law school in America, the DC bar for over 20 years now, I felt that my story was mostly, mainly American and that it was very, very international. No, I never um, thought that I wasn't or originally for Cameroon, that Africa wasn't a part of my life, of my story. But I felt that it wasn't the main part of my story. And I felt that it couldn't shape my story, that it couldn't shape the way people would listen or would look at my story. And because I felt that, listen, I left when I was 14. I haven't really been back. And I've lived most of my life out of Africa, out of Cameroon. So my story is was, in my opinion, an international story, global story, a story from a globalized modern elite. That's where I was coming from. When I always felt a sense of wonder when I was meeting people and they were trying to, they were always telling me, "Can you explain Cameroon to me? Can you tell me more about Cameroon? Can you tell me more about Africa?" And I was always like, no, I can't. You know, I can't. And I think I wouldn't do it justice. And I think it isn't fair. And I think I'm not the right person to do that. It's not my job. So I, I already had that lack of awareness of how people would perceive me. Even in America, even my peers, I felt that I was like them. I felt that I was a part. We went to the same school, um, ate the same meals, watched the same movies. I've, never really even felt, African American. There was a comment, I think from a lady who said that I said in the first episode of my podcast that I was African American. No. And I was like, no, I never felt African American. But yeah, so when it came time for me to talk about my story, when I was forced to, it starts when my dad gets old. My dad is Victor Fotso. I talked about. He's one of the first industrialists of the African continent. He was one of the wealthiest men in Cameroon. So when he gets into trouble and that I have to help because he's being mistreated, and I realize something awful is happening. I realized that I have to tell this story. It is my story. It isn't only his story. For once in my life, even though that I know how to write, even though I know that I know how to tell stories, I am faced with this silence. People are embarrassed. They are silent. They are even sometimes perplexed. Sometimes they're even hostile. Don't understand this hostility where people um, don't understand what I'm trying to do. I'm in Belgium at the time. I'm trying to tell the story of my dad and my story to Belgian folks in French. And I feel, because I'm very, very confident in my ability to write and to tell a story, I feel like it should be very, very easy. Something very, very dangerous is happening, something that anybody, in my opinion, should be able to relate to. An old person is being mistreated. And I feel that because I'm in the Brussels bar, I'm under their foreign lawyer list, I feel like it should be very, very easy. But I run into this thing that I don't even know how to describe, where people don't care. People don't understand. People are even angry. Other lawyers, colleagues, don't care. They have no compassion. They have anger. They're even hostile. People are like, why are you talking to us about this? Why should it matter? This is a rich folk story. And me and they, I don't understand. I keep stressing the urgency. My dad is over 90. He's going to die. Um, things have to be done. I go to the French authorities, to the Cameroonian authorities. I do, so it's a very, very international story. I even try to get involved with, American law firms. I, I keep telling the story. I keep telling the story because to me, it's a compelling story. It's a modern story. And I'm thinking, there's no way I can be failing at this. He's a great man. It's Victor Fotso. He's a great man. He has done something amazing. He has built an empire coming from nothing. I feel like, even my colleagues in America should be able to relate to the story. And yet nobody cares. I fail. People, even when they answer me on this, like, no, no, what's the deal? Who cares? And it takes me forever to understand that the trouble here is the African part of the story. It makes it um, totally exotic. It's a man with a lot of wives. It's a man who comes from Cameroon. It's a man who has made a lot of money. African wealth, success. He has a bad smells. He has a bad smell, especially if you're not offering to the people that you're trying to tell the story a reason to care. You're not offering them money. You're basically asking them to understand something to them is very, very other, very, very unapplicable. How do you feel any type of compassion for a wealthy African who has had so much money, but who's a very, very traditional African guy? And how do you even listen to this uh, lady, to this woman who um, was, raised in America, who writes well, but who's asking you for your help and who's asking you to understand and not offering you a lot of money. I run into Miante, and I never, never, never even imagine that the problem is the African component of the story. Because for me, it's not even imaginable. I don't understand. I'm like, great guy, getting old, getting abused by his kids, getting abused by people who are in the public domain. How can nobody care? But Miente, nobody cares. Nobody cares. I don't even see Miente that at some point disability becomes an issue because I become the Black African woman who's disabled and who's basically trying to cause trouble. And because the other side have money, it makes everything messy. And me, I'm failing at the main thing, the awareness that this is an African story. So how do you tell a modern African story? The first and the main thing, Miente, you have to be aware of it. It helps. If you don't get it, you can't address people's biases. You can't understand how they see it. You can't get that an exotic component that makes the story very, very problematic. You can't address the fact that people to help you are expecting you to offer them money. You can't understand that they will never, 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 ever feel any type of compassion for you because they feel that, oh, wealthy folks, wealthy African folks, more likely than not, they cheated. Their wealth is not really legitimate, and that you are probably a spoiled brat that was given everything, and that nah, why should they care? I failed at that first thing because I never really saw it like that. To me, it was an amazing story. It was a human story. It was an international story. Yes, my dad and I were Africans, but I felt like we were Africans who were showing that Africa is a normal continent. That the so-called exotic side of Africa is very, very banal. That African societies are ordinary. And I never felt that because my dad's story is unique, it's extraordinary, that it would make it possible for people to get away with abusing him and abusing me, for the system to basically say, we don't care, we don't see it. And if they were not doing what needs to be done, the money part, the explaining part, it's not going to work. So if you don't realize that you are telling a modern African story, you're going to stumble first major roadblock, which is Africanism, the exoticism, which is very much like Orientalism. It makes it very difficult for people to get past their own biases. They're always going to say, it's too complicated. It's too complicated. Who is she? Where does she come from? Why do I care? She has money. She has lived a very, very privileged life. Most people in Africa don't. It makes ordering very, 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 very easy if you are not aware of the fact that you are telling a modern African story. You stumble on the first roadblock, Africanism, compassion. It's almost impossible. You can't start with the fact that your dad and yourself and you are the exceptions to the rules. And Niente, that's where I started. I started with my dad, amazing story. A story from rags to riches. Born Western region of Cameroon. Doesn't know how to read or write, but becomes one of the wealthiest men in Africa. I started with my story. Daughter, disabled, goes to New York, becomes a lawyer and a writer. Unique story, but it doesn't help in this context because when you're the exception to the rules, and that you're telling an African story. It makes compassion impossible. People don't want to relate because they feel that you're lucky. They feel that you're bitching and they don't want to help you. They're never going to help you because you're the exceptions to the rules. And to them, if you're Africans and you're not poor and you were given all the opportunities to make it, they're never going to help. The first thing that you have to do, if you have to tell a modern African story, is to be aware that you're telling one. It makes it possible to confront the other roadblocks, which are Africanism and the refusal that most people are going to have to offer you compassion or to offer you help. So, mi gente, see you Thursday. I will tell you where to start when you're telling a modern African story.